This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Wednesday Twilight show. I'm your host, Michelle, and joining me tonight is an extraordinary senior leader. Together, we will discuss the impact leaders have on the quality of staff training and development. The question is, do you influence change or disable professional growth? Stay tuned.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello there, everyone, and it is so good to be with you tonight. I missed the last fortnight, and it feels like that was ages ago. So it's really good to be back on this platform to talk about leadership, and that's what I've been doing for the last couple of shows. I've been talking about leadership. Last time we talked about leading change. And so tonight I have a very special guest who's going to be joining us as we continue this discussion. And as usual, before we even begin to talk about the things that we're discussing tonight, and before we get into that, I always like to do a little reflection on the previous show. Always so good for me to do that, just to think about it in a reflective way and how it's worked and the feedback that I receive from others. And first of all, let me just say thanks to everybody who joins me live each fortnight and those who then take the time out to download the podcast, to listen back, and then take time out of your busy schedule to send me feedback, to tell me how much it's impacted on your own practice or how it's helped you to reflect on your day to day life in the classroom or as a leader in education. So let me just welcome you all. My special guest is here, ready, waiting. I will introduce him in a minute. We've got Sophia, and she is from Ghana. Sophia, I am indeed honored. Thank you so much for joining us. I really hope that you will take away something from tonight's show. And remember, you can send us a message through the Podbean app, which you're already on. Thank you so much. And you can make a comment as well. We welcome that. And I know that I have some listeners in Jamaica as well. I do know I have a former classmate from high school. So we go way back. She said she will be joining tonight. And of course, as usual, my lovely mom and dad, all the way in Kingston, Jamaica. Mom said she's made sure she's done all the chores so that she could listen to me tonight. So thank you all for joining. And so I was saying earlier that it's always good just to reflect on the previous show because the whole point of this is to make some kind of impact. And so I'm just going to share with you a voice note from somebody who downloaded that podcast on leading change. And this is what she had to say. Do listen.
Morning, Michelle. Morning, or whatever time it is over there. Listen, I'm just halfway through listening to this latest episode of your podcast. First of all, well done and congratulations on this amazing thing that you are doing. It's great. I love the platform, and yeah, I'm just loving what you're doing, girl. So well done, well done, well done. I just wanted to just quickly just drop you a quick voice note because I'm listening to this. A lot of the things that you speak about in this latest episode is right on the money, just right on the money. Yeah, it's great. I'm actually going to share the podcast with my senior leadership team. How they take it is how they take it. I'm not sure, but I hope they take it as some real positive reflection to reflect on our own practice, and individually and collectively as a team, and that actually some changes can actually move. That means meaningful staff well-being. But yeah, I'm getting a lot from it. So just thank you very much.
And there we go. And that's what it's all about. And it's not to berate anybody. It's not to be negative. That's never been my approach, never will be. but it's about developing each other and steering each other in the right direction and sharing good practice and sharing what the research is saying and how we can use that to improve our very own leadership styles and our own teaching skills as well. Let me pause again to welcome Mariana. Mariana is listening all the way from Romania. We also go way back, back in the day at a school in Hastings. We would gather on the playground at break time or when we were on duty, Mariana, and talk about all the things that we thought needed to be improved. It's good to have you tonight. And so this is what this platform is all about. As I said before, it's making sure that as educators, we have a platform that encourages us to reflect on our practice and to be reflective about it, to inspire, to motivate, and of course, to influence. So don't forget to download the Podbean app to call or send us your questions or comments. And so without further ado, let me take a moment here in this opportunity to welcome tonight's guest, Mr. Ollie Lewis. Ollie is an international senior leader, currently deputy head at Amity Abu Dhabi. He's won multiple awards in education, been published in a range of fellow educators' books, and has been a trustee for a MAT in the UK, along with holding a range of post nominals. Ollie is a founding fellow of the Chartered College of Teaching, an international awards judge, and an author. So Ollie wears many, many hats. And I met Ollie at a teachers' conference in Abu Dhabi, and I attended his workshop and have been following him and his amazing work in education ever since. And I think maybe upon reflection, Ollie, you might have been thinking, what a weirdo I was, because I stood right at the edge of the platform waiting for you to stop so I could just pounce because I was so inspired by your presentation. And then I thought, wait a minute, that's what I want to do my dissertation on. And we had a lovely chat. And ever since, I mean, I remember saying to you, listen, Ollie, should you ever publish a book or a journal or articles, please let me know because honestly, I need to know more about the world of EdTech. And so I felt like it was the right thing to do to ask you to be on tonight's show because it's all about how leaders continue to learn themselves and then whether inadvertently or explicitly or implicitly guiding staff and encouraging staff to do the same, this continuous personal development and professional development. So welcome, Ollie, and thanks for taking the time to join us on Teachers Talk Radio tonight. I know it's your bedtime, so thank you so much for giving up your time. I know it's after 9 here in the UAE, so thank you so much. Welcome.
You are most and always welcome, Michelle. Thank you for such a lovely introduction. And if you know anyone that's listening live or back to it, we did meet at a conference. You did pounce, but you know when like-minded people just kind of zen and bounce off each other. I think that was the start of something because, as you said, you know we've caught up. We've had a Zoom or a Teams meeting since then. We've kind of bumped into each other. In our busy schedules anyway, because we're both passionate and driven educators, I think, that ultimately want the best for everybody that we work with. And, you know, people like that just come together naturally. We gravitate towards each other, right?
I totally agree. And that's what it's about, the passion. I'm always seeking out the conferences and the workshops just to make my practice better, to influence the people I work with as well. And just for my own sake, really, because I think education is so dynamic and it's important that we keep abreast of the changes and the research and the new data and the new findings. And so I'm so happy, Ollie, that we met. I'm really happy about that. We're going to take a break and listen to some of our sponsors. And then when we get back, I will be asking Ollie some questions and then we'll have a discussion about tonight's show. Stay tuned.
Empowering education with Easy for You, where innovation meets accessibility. Our subscription-based offering not only equips schools with cutting-edge devices, but revolutionizes the learning experience by eliminating financial barriers, streamlining support, and embracing technology. We're not just providing tools, we're shaping a future where every student can thrive. unburdened by limitations, easy for you, transforming education, one device at a time. Find out more at www.easyforyou.school.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Reading Solutions UK. Are you looking for best practices and innovative strategies to foster confident, lifelong readers? Join the free online International Reading Conference on the 11th, 12th and 13th of June. Hear from speakers like TV personality and education expert Basit Siddiqui, beloved children's author Michael Rosen, fluency expert Tim Rosinski, EEF specialist Chloe Butlin, the National Literacy Trust's Irene Picton, and a range of experienced practitioners, including MAT leaders, deputy heads, heads of English, high-level teaching assistants, and school librarians. Through the three-day conference, speakers will explore a range of topics at the forefront of the current educational landscape, with sessions relevant for all educators and key stages. Visit Reading Solutions at readingsolutions.uk.co.uk for more information and to sign up for this free conference.
Hi teachers, we're Apps for Good, and we give schools like yours free introductory computing courses. Our courses are for everyone, including those who aren't computing teachers, and they're fully equipped with resources mapped to the UK computing curriculum. Independent learning is central to our courses. Your students will develop essential and digital skills by working in teams to create prototype apps for good. We'll even connect you with industry volunteers to give real-world feedback. Let's empower every young person you teach to shape their future with technology. Speak to us at www.appsforgood.org.
So lots there to refer to, lots out there for teachers. And tonight we're going to talk about other things that we could do as well to develop more professional capabilities. And if you haven't joined the Reading Solution, remember it's free and we love a freebie with quality. I actually joined yesterday and took in some of the training, which was very, very useful. It's lovely to see the thinking behind different reading solutions. And actually, Ollie, I was a little bit starstruck because I didn't realize it was the Gogglebox guy who was hosting it. And so, of course, I sent him a message. Oh my goodness, is that you? Wow. Of course, he ignored me completely because it's meant to be a professional environment, but I couldn't believe it. And then I ran to the department and I said, oh, I was just in the presence of somebody from this UK show. And Ollie, they all looked at me as if I was speaking a different language. Like, what? These are teachers from the UK as well. Never heard of the show. But there you have it. So lots there to take in. So let's just talk a little bit about why this particular topic tonight and what is the topic tonight. So as I said earlier, I've been doing a series on leadership inspired by my current studies and observations over the years. And so tonight we'll be discussing the need for leaders to continue to engage in ongoing professional development. We will talk about the benefits and examine the impact on staff development if leaders are not learning. So the leading question tonight is, are you an influencer as a leader? And mind you, leadership is not just senior leadership. As a teacher, you are a leader. You're a leader in your classroom. If you're a middle leader, then you have a team to work with, and so on. So are you an influencer or a disabler? Are you leading like a champion? So the question is, who's an influencer? And this term was made popular due to the rise of social media. And we know that such influencers, they don't just inspire, but they effect some kind of change. You know, they use a particular brand and everybody wants to acquire that. And then they gather this large following. And this is what effective leaders should be aiming to do. not gathering large followers and everybody doing everything that you do, but it's moving beyond inspiring and providing the tools for staff to build on the inspiration and create something tangible, something visible and impactful. So, influencers, in my opinion, they often have the qualities of what I term and what I've learned through my studies generalists, outsiders. They're on the outside, they have a wide view of what's going on. And as a result of that, they can be a little bit more innovative. And then this motivates staff and transforms staff's approaches to teaching and learning and to being leaders themselves. So the question is, who are the disablers? Those who fail to create an environment conducive to continued professional growth, thus inhibiting the culture of ongoing professional development. And we want to talk about how will that impact on staff and their own self-belief. So the question tonight is, how do leaders continue to learn? How do we transmit that to the rest of the staff so that they too are motivated to do just that? And Ollie, we're going to go straight into the questions now because there are a few things there I'd like us to unpick together. So
Let's
the
do it.
first thing is I'd like you to tell us a little bit about your journey to senior leadership.
I've had I think, quite a kind of diverse experience in schools, and I think I'm quite fortunate for that to kind of end up where I am now, at Amity. I've worked in the state sector in the UK for 5 years. Um, my experience there was super rich, but I was naive, I think, at the time. I didn't realise how good the school that I was in actually was. It was my
Mhm.
first school that I'd worked in, so my two teacher training schools couldn't have been more polar opposites. I worked in I started out in a affluent selective grammar school, and then moved to a completely different town where about 80% of the parent population were unemployed. No one went to university. Higher education just wasn't a thing. So I had, quite a diverse experience in getting to the point where I actually worked in my first school, and it was incredible. The kind of the collective and affiliative work that the teachers in that place did was just astounding. And I
Mhm.
didn't really realize and appreciate that until I moved on. I knew it was good, but I didn't realize quite how good it was, until I'd left. I then worked in a independent school, for another 5 years, and I picked up just by that point I was a middle leader. So in the state system, I've kind of worked my way up to the point of being deputy head of science. I'd done that for 2 years, and then once I set foot into the independent sector, I kind of turned my hat to a whole host of different things without really realizing it, just because I was passionate and driven, and I wanted the learners to have a better experience than I felt like they were getting.
Mhm.
And I'm one of those people that, like you, I just throw myself at stuff, and I'm like, there's a gap there. Let's make that bit better. How
Yeah.
am I going to do that? Well, if I start out, people might follow me, and I'll just kind of see how it goes, and try and make stuff better. So, within a year or two in that independent school, I was assistant housemaster. I was head of the year. I was head of racket sports, so like squash, badminton, and real tennis.
Mhm.
It's kind of like leading sports and leading kind of academic development for kids. I then started to push kind of G&T things, which was what it was labelled as at the time, and then moved internationally. Just had this like crazy idea. My wife and I, we just had a child, and we were like, well, let's just go international.
Mhm.
Let's see what the rage is all about, and it was an intense independent school. It was a boarding school, so kind of the metaphor, analogy, whatever you want to say about
Mhm.
my experience there was, term time started. I felt like I was in the Navy working on a submarine. Like see you later world. And then term ended, and we came up, and I got back onto shore, and kind of entered into the world. So it was mega intense, and I think the decision for us to go international was just one of, me not wanting to be that Sunday afternoon dad that kind of I would have become had I stayed in the independent sector in the UK.
Mhm.
And I'd always wanted to experience more than what the UK could offer, as a family. So we decided to go international. And at that point, I think because I turned my hat to a few different lenses within a school in terms of leadership, whether that being kind of both academic and pastoral and then sport, it gave me a bit of a view into different parts of the school and kind of working with students in a multitude of different ways. And I think that lended itself quite well to me moving to an international context then, where suddenly you're in a school where you've got 90 different nationalities, loads of different languages being spoken, a real melting pot of kind of culture and experience to draw on. And I think having worked in different guises with students in that independent school, it set me up quite well. I won't say incredibly well, because I don't think you can ever be fully prepared for
Yeah.
that change in international schools, but it set me up pretty well for taking on a faculty level job out here. And then at the end of my first year, I think I was probably a bit more vocal than I should have been. Just in the sense that I think the principal could see that I was driven and I wanted more for colleagues and for kids, and I had ideas. So then I became kind of interim assistant head for teaching and learning. It was a massive school. We had nearly 2,000 kids, so there were two of us doing that. We had like 200 staff. So there was a space for me to support and nudge and guide and lead on stuff in that school. And then it just kind of carried on from there. COVID hit. I was, one of the ed tech guys in the school. I ended up leading on all things digital across that school for a couple of years. And then we got to the point after 4 years internationally where we thought, actually, let's go home, because, we had some family stuff going on. My mum wasn't particularly well. I got offered a wicked job back in the UK that was like just what I'd wanted at the time. So I was offered a multi-academy trust level leadership role, specific to technology. So head of digital transformation. And that was a wicked job, because I had the opportunity to work with over 5,000 students, over 800 staff across 8 different schools, from primary through to secondary settings, high pupil premium, as well as in a school that was nationally recognised for changing the narrative and the outcomes for students in a city where it was quite deprived socio-economically. And I think they'd sent over the course of a couple of years 1,000 students to university, where they were the first students in their family, first children to ever go to university. And I'm really proud of that kind of role. But we had a really obscure kind of setting in England where it meant we had to leave the country just for kind of family reasons around my wife's visa. That's a whole different show, so we won't go into that.
Yeah.
We'll
Okay.
go down the political route, but
Yeah.
that was amazing, because it gave me the opportunity from a leadership viewpoint to kind of work from a central core team that kind of governed and shaped and molded education for thousands of children, while working with a whole host of different people in lots of different positions. So, I'd worked with the senior leaders in all those schools. I'd worked with the teachers, the middle leaders, the IT department, the finance departments, and it was really nourishing and enriching doing that role. And then, we came back out here to the UAE because it was familiar to us, and we needed that kind of familiar context for my daughter moving back again. And I'm here and I'm back, and I get to do awesome stuff in my school, and I get to the privilege of kind of going to events like you and speaking to people. And I think for me, my kind of guiding principle around how I've got to where I've got is just a thirst for learning and a thirst for trying to help others get better, but also improve our offering for students, whatever that looks like in the school, whether that's kind of being that critical friend to support the pastoral lead, or whether that is leading on academic matters in the school, or driving digital strategy and teaching and learning. But I think it's just that insatiable want to be better myself and help others get better. It's kind of got me to where I am, and not being afraid to fail.
Yes.
I think quite often the narrative is you can't fail in education. You can't leave it to there's too much at stake for you to leave it to chance to fail. But a part of growth is failing, right?
Definitely.
Certainly when you go for a promotion or another job, you don't always get everything right, and you have to fail to grow and to learn. And I don't think I've been scared of that throughout my career. I think I've just taken that as all right, that was a good learning opportunity. When I'm in that position next time, I'll have a better understanding of um,
It's required. And
what
so,
success looks
yeah,
like.
exactly. And that's all part of the journey. And I think it is so important that leaders actually make this known to staff as well, especially younger members of staff who are really keen to do well. It's making sure that they also understand that it's okay to fail at something because you learn from it and then you get better as a result of that. But whether that's articulated by lots of leaders is another question, Ollie. I was actually going to
Yeah,
ask you, how did all the different roles help you in your development as a leader? But you've already answered that. And I just wanted to ask you something. You mentioned that you were very vocal and sometimes too vocal. Now,
yeah,
I've been accused of that in the past,
yeah.
and apparently that has been used to maybe keep me in my corner or hold me back. Do you think leaders are often afraid of those who are a bit more outspoken or who will challenge things?
I think they can be. I just think it's important you get the challenge right. Um, I'll always try and praise in public and challenge in private. I think that's important.
Yes.
When I kind of got my wrist slapped back in that position where I was a bit too vocal, it was only me and the principal, right? There was nobody else in the room. It was just me to him saying, "Look, I don't think this is particularly good. I think this is what we should do to make it better."
Mhm.
Um, and I don't mind saying those things, um, but
Yeah.
I think the core thing that I always try and follow with a bit of challenge is just I'll provide a solution or at least an idea. I don't know necessarily if it is what is needed or is looking for, but I will always try and present some form of solution to say, look, this is what we could do, and here are the ramifications of doing that. And I
Mhm.
think that's important. Just approaching everything with that kind of solution focused
Yeah.
mindset and attitude.
Definitely. And that's my take as well. And, even as head of English, director of learning over the years, I've always said to colleagues, remember, you can always have a concern or an issue, but make sure when you come to speak to me, you also have a solution or some suggestions so we could talk them through as well. And I actually like what you said, Ollie, praise in public, challenge in private. And to be honest, that's something I've had to work on over the years,
Mm.
especially in my early career, so to speak, because when I was younger, I just wanted to say it right there and then in the
Yeah,
middle of a staff briefing, nope, sorry, I disagree. But over the years, as you mature, you realize, wait a minute, there's a time and place where you should challenge, but definitely praise in public. I love that. So my next question is, how would you define leadership? And you mentioned earlier that you were in a school that you considered to be good. Was it the
yeah.
leadership? And how would you define leadership?
I think it was the leadership, and I had such an awesome moment last year because it was one of those, double, triple takes where I was at a conference and I saw my first ever head, and she was there, and a long time had passed since I was last kind of working for her. Um, and I'd say, look, do you remember when I was first a teacher and I was working in your school and you were amazing and that school was amazing because of you? And it was just a nice, rich moment, um, to bump into Helen and kind of see her there and just catch up. But what qualities do they have? I think she had a lot of them, and the more that I think about this, the longer the list gets. And I don't know, I don't know if that's necessarily good or helpful, right? Um,
Mhm.
but I think there are a few things. I think integrity is important as a leader. I certainly think it's helpful for people to know that you have that kind of approach and you carry that kudos with you, with knowing you'll say what you do and what you stand for. I think empathy is really important as a leader. We're all humans, and I don't think we should ever lose sight of that, especially in leadership. You never know what people are going through in their personal lives.
Mhm.
And I think the more empathetic we can be with people, I think that's really important. At any layer in an organisation, I think you need that. I think you need to be a good communicator.
Yes.
I think that's really important, and that's not just being able to articulate your vision. I think that's down to layers like how you show that you're an active listener. You can really invest in someone in that particular moment in time, so that they know that you're on the same page as them. You can understand, you can walk in their shoes, but at the same time, you can help steer and guide and nudge and coach them. I think being inquisitive and just questioning is good, not to be annoying, which is a label that I have had associated at times where I'm like, why are we doing it like that? But just out of general inquisitiveness as to how you got to that point in your thinking, and what's guided you to get to that point. And I just think it's useful to question. I think being aware of yourself and others is quite important, being able to read the room. We all have moments of, I guess, tension, pressure, whatever you want to kind of call it. But I think being aware of how you are, how you come across, and then how other people are and how best to approach them is quite important. The list goes on. I could keep going. I think you need to be collaborative and a team player, adaptable, and I think that's probably enough for me to go on right now. But I think all of those things help influence, guide, and shape people, teams, and an organization.
Yeah, thank you so much. So just to sum up, you mentioned integrity, very, very important. We need ethical leaders, without a doubt. Empathy. And I noted here equity as well, because if we're going to have empathy, it should go for, it should not be limited to a particular group of teachers. It should be for every single member of staff. Great communicator. And yeah, you said it's not just about communicating the vision, it's communicating those policies and those expectations as well. I think it's Nick Hart who spoke about consistency or coherence. So it's so important that through communication, we have coherent leadership, to be inquisitive. And this is what the nature of tonight's show will be about, Ollie, when we get further on in the questions. It's about leaders who are inquisitive, always looking for answers, always asking questions, and therefore inspiring staff to be the same. Because the last thing you want to have are lackluster leaders who are just regurgitating what they learned some 20 years ago and just, constantly in these CPDs reminding staff of these things that they too learned in their training years. So it's having that inquisitive mind. It's so important. The self-awareness, being aware of those around you, being aware of their skill sets, being aware of their interests. I find increasingly, Ollie, and I'm sure it's different in your situation, where often I have to stop leaders in their tracks and reintroduce myself and tell them some of the great things I was doing on the weekend and the conferences I've attended and the books that I'm reading and the articles that I'm writing. And I think it's so important. And I know the days get really busy, but I think it is so important that we are aware of the people around us and to use them accordingly. Because I tell you what, I get bored easily and I get fidgety and I always want to do the next thing. Once one is embedded, that is, I want to move on to the next project. So that awareness and collaboration and being adaptable is so important. And before we continue, let me just welcome some other guests who've joined us and some listeners. We've got Emily. Hey, Emily. She's a fellow presenter, former colleague of mine. I miss you so much, Emily. It's so good to have you online.
Hi,
And everybody else who's there, Hugh, Marianne is still with us. Thank you so much. And everybody else who's listening, Proficient Business Solutions, thank you so much for joining. And I hope you are enjoying the discussion. And those who are listening from other parts of the world as well, thank you so much. Remember to download the Podbean app so you can ask your questions or make your comments. And Ollie, Emily said hi. Really enjoying the show. Thank you so much. She is. She's amazing. She's amazing. And that's one of the things I was talking about, being aware. But that's a whole other show.
Yeah.
So you've already covered the qualities of a good leader. So I'm going to skip to the next question. Olin asked, do you think leaders should have a good grasp of the theories behind leadership? Why or why not? Do you think they also need that theoretical background as well? Or it's not important?
I think you need a little bit of it, but I don't think you need probably quite as much as most people think. I think you need
Mhm.
to be aware of kind of probably the most common one is Goldman's leadership styles, right? And that seems to be like the question that's on pretty much every leadership interview ever, whether you're a middle leader or a senior leader, right? Like, tell me about your leadership style, and when would you be this particular person? But what I think is probably more important is actually having a mentor or a coach and kind of learning as you go, and having that professional sandboard to say, I'm in this situation, here's what I'm thinking about doing, this is how I'm going to approach it, this is why I'm going to approach it in that particular way, what do you think? um, what would you do? And I think it's helpful to kind of have that. We can get so bogged down in kind of academic research and in theory and thinking that, and coupled with that, there's so much of it out there, right? that,
Oh, yeah.
um,
Yeah.
that it's for me, I think it's good to have an idea and an awareness and knowledge of some of the kind of key parts of it, but
Mhm.
it's almost impossible, right, to keep up with everything that's published
Mhm.
at the moment. I mean, that's a full-time job in and of itself, right? So I think experience counts for an awful lot. I remember when I was
Mhm.
younger, I was just desperate to climb the ladder, and actually just took a moment and paused and just thought, you'll be a better leader when you just slow down and learn from other people, um, learn from their experiences, be that kind of inquisitive person and ask them why they've gone about doing, that conversation in that particular way, or how they've disseminated some information to staff in a particular way, and um, just just learn by doing, right? And make a few mistakes along the way and just become a better person of it. But you mentioned at the very start of the show, um, you know, passionate people, passionate educators are keen on developing each other. And I think that starts with the self, right?
Yes.
The best people that I have ever worked with are cognizant of themselves and how they are, and their skills and motivations, and then um, how to get the best out of other people.
Mhm.
And I think that's really key. Really, it's knowing yourself, who you are, how you are, and then starting to draw down on different facets from other people that you've worked with, so you can go, right, that worked really well, I'm going to give that a go.
Yeah.
Along the way, people
Yeah.
like you and I will read loads of books and blogs and all sorts of things, and pick up hints and tips and experience along the way. But
Mhm.
that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah. So don't you think leaders need to have, to an extent, that theoretical framework so that through that they can then develop even further or become more cognizant of who they are as a leader? For example, the different styles of leadership. I mean, you might just naturally do it, but not know it is called this, or this. But don't you think having that theoretical knowledge really helps to support the practical application of leadership?
I think it does, but at the same time, I think what we're great at doing is overcomplicating things. And maybe
Mhm.
that's just me and my own naivety, just reading something, going, okay, if I'm a democratic leader, I just ask people what they think, right? Well, that's just me being collaborative and trying to get some consensus on some stuff. But that just makes sense and aligns to me as a person
Mhm.
outside of education, because I care about people and I want to know what they think. Um, and you know,
Yeah.
I guess as a framework, it's helpful to know those different like leadership styles and what it means in practice. Um, but
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know if that's something that you need to read a million books and a whole bunch of essays on. I just think it's
Mhm.
helpful to read a couple of books and then discuss it with someone,
Yeah.
and kind of get into that, right. These are the different types of kind of leadership, and this is what it looks like in principle and in practice. Okay, let's delve into this scenario. How would we deal with that? Um, and I think that's a useful reflective time.
Yeah. But you would agree that some reading has to take place or some kind of
Yes,
ongoing
yeah,
yeah.
Yeah. You have to do something. You can't do none. You don't learn
Yeah.
everything by osmosis, right? You absolutely do. And I think a lot of my, I guess, early framework and knowledge around leadership came when I did a master's
Mhm.
in educational leadership, funnily enough. And that's kind of, God, that feels like an age ago now. But I guess that ever since then, I've just been trying to put those things that I learned into practice from that reading.
Exactly. And that's the point, Ollie. Because for me, I find that since I've resumed my studies, I just have become so much more observant and reflective of my own practice. Because, okay, so you've been a leader for so long and you've learned things along the way. But I think when you get that knowledge to go with it, knowledge based on research, for me, it has really improved my practice, my perspective on things, the way I look at the school as a whole and not just me in my
Yeah,
department. It's really helped me and forced me to think about that. And I think the studies that we're doing, it makes you have to reflect and you have to reflect in your practice. And I think it's so important for leaders every now and again just to stop and do a refreshers course, keep in the know. And that's why we do these conferences, and that's why we go to because we want to know what's happening around us so that we can always pass on this information to staff and empower them as well. So I think, we can't function just on the theory because yeah, that's on its own. Makes absolutely no sense. But we also need to apply that to our practice daily and understanding what's new. What do people think about instructional leaders? What do people think about transactional leaders? Is that a thing anymore? That kind of thing. Um, Let me just pause to share something Emily said. She said, I agree with Ollie about simplifying things, but the theory comes in handy when we want to improve our practice. Yeah. And I think that's the point we're making for sure, Emily, that the theory helps us definitely to improve our practice and see what's going on out there and how the educational landscape is changing. And Sandy, all the way from Jamaica, thank you so much. She says, I'm so proud of you. Thank you so much for joining, Sandy. That's what us Holy Childhood High girls do, right? Thank you for joining. We're about to take another break, Ollie, but whilst we're on a break, I just want you to think about a few things and some of the things that I really want to get into. And that is, what does a learning institution look like? A learning organization. And why is it important for leaders to ensure that their schools and the environment that they're in promotes learning at whatever level? Why is that essential? Also, Ollie, I'm going straight into your forte now, and I want you to think about how technology has influenced the educational landscape. And are we prepared? Are we shying away from it? Are we ready from what's to come? Are we keeping ahead of our students when it comes to technology? So, everybody, do stay tuned. Lots for Ollie to think about, and I can assure you he has the answers. So, stay
no
tuned.
pressure.
Empowering education with Easy for You, where innovation meets accessibility. Our subscription-based offering not only equips schools with cutting-edge devices, but revolutionizes the learning experience by eliminating financial barriers, streamlining support, and embracing technology. We're not just providing tools, we're shaping a future where every student can thrive, unburdened by limitations. Easy for You, transforming education, one device at a time. Find out more at www.easyforyou.school.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Reading Solutions UK. Are you looking for best practices and innovative strategies to foster confident, lifelong readers? Join the free online International Reading Conference on the 11th, 12th and 13th of June. Hear from speakers like TV personality and education expert Basit Siddiqui, beloved children's author Michael Rosen, fluency expert Tim Rosinski, EEF specialist Chloe Butlin, the National Literacy Trust's Irene Picton, and a range of experienced practitioners, including MAT leaders, deputy heads, heads of English, high-level teaching assistants, and school librarians. Through the 3-day conference, speakers will explore a range of topics at the forefront of the current educational landscape, with sessions relevant for all educators and key stages. Visit Reading Solutions at readingsolutionsuk.co.uk for more information and to sign up for this free conference.
Hi teachers, we're Apps for Good, and we give schools like yours free introductory computing courses. Our courses are for everyone, including those who aren't computing teachers, and they're fully equipped with resources mapped to the UK computing curriculum. Independent learning is central to our courses. Your students will develop essential and digital skills by working in teams to create prototype apps for good. We'll even connect you with industry volunteers to give real-world feedback. Let's empower every young person you teach to shape their future with technology. Speak to us at www.appsforgood.org.
And welcome back, everybody. And that's a nice segue into the next part of our discussion, talking about apps to improve learning. So, Ollie, what would you say are some of the challenges we're facing in education today? And how should leaders equip themselves and staff to tackle these challenges?
Gosh, there's quite a few to name.
Mhm.
You don't have to look too far on any sort of social media or news network to talk about recruitment crisis in teaching, certainly in the UK.
Yeah.
Lots of teachers moving out into this part of the world, actually. I think there's a funding issue in many schools and regions across the world in
Mhm.
terms of adequately funding education. I'd say time and pace are two challenges for us as well. Your question, one of the parts of this question to me, Michelle, was around, what does it take to be a learning organisation? I think time is one of them, right?
Mhm.
You've got to make the main thing the main thing. So if you are a learning organisation, you have to just devote adequate time to, all of the different ways in which you enable staff to learn,
Yeah.
whether that's kind of through their like disciplinary knowledge in their subject or kind of organisational knowledge that you want them to have, or any other area dynamic in the school that you want to grow capacity and truth in. I think that's probably one of our kind of ongoing and biggest challenges as educators are asked to do more, but the time seems to diminish in that
Mhm.
sense. And I think the thing that compounds it is pace, the rate of pace of education. Um, I feel like in the 18 years that I've been in education, we are asked to do more consistently. It kind of feels,
Mhm.
whether that's just because services have diminished, or just the way and shape that education is kind of going, where we are that entire wraparound now for many young people. In terms of supporting them, not just educationally, but with other aspects of their lives.
Mhm.
And that can compound the essence and sense of time that we actually have to devote to many things. I think mental health is quite a large issue across the world.
Yeah.
If you're looking at recruitment, funding, time, and pace, I think it would be remiss to not mention that. Teachers are pushed quite hard everywhere across the world.
Mhm.
And the students as well, right? It's challenging to be a young person in the current world, especially in the last 5 to 6 years with kind of what's happened. So I think an awareness and action to support everyone,
Yeah.
and try to scale your support, however that looks in your current setting, is really important. To draw on what you said earlier, you absolutely bang on the money. Equity of access, is
Yes.
is a challenge for many different areas. Those that have more, and those that don't, and that gap seems to be dividing. And while I am probably the most passionate person, or one of the most passionate people around EdTech, that is accelerating the divide, whether you like it or not,
Oh, yes.
in many settings, which is a real challenge for us. So those are kind of some of the, I guess,
Yeah.
high level challenges that
Yeah.
we probably collectively all face.
Yeah. I wanted to go back to the recruitment crisis that you mentioned, and that's a global issue, to be honest. And I had a show earlier in the year. We talked about, recruitment and early career teachers and why they're not staying anymore. And one of the guests, who was a teach first trainee, she said one of the reasons she didn't want to stay in teaching was because the training was so intense. But when she started to teach, she didn't feel as though the CPD was ongoing, and that
Yeah,
intensity was gone. And then she just got bored and she didn't feel challenged anymore. And I spoke to some colleagues about this as well, only today, and they said, they feel as though, and this is the exact word they use, that they often have to fight for training, to get some kind of training, or to go and get a CPD on a specification that they're teaching.
yeah.
And again, it goes down to timing as well, and funding. However, some teachers believe that the funding is there and the time could be made, but leaders prioritize other things and not the teacher's professional development. Uh, what do you think?
I think that's exactly it, right?
Mhm.
It's really difficult to find the balance, because you do have to find a balance, because operationally you still need to carry on. But
Yeah.
I think the most powerful asset that a school can have is if you release a teacher and you give them that time to go on and invest in themselves, something has to come back into the building. You need to give them a platform to share that learning with everybody else, whether that's at a department or faculty level. It's really important that there is that kind of follow up and that dissemination of information and learning from that experience, or whether
Mhm.
it's at a whole school level where someone comes in and shares um, what they've been doing at scale. Now, the audience is kind of depending on that, because it depends on what that particular bit of professional learning is. But um, you know, the challenge we all face, right, is you can't have. So you take my current setting, we've got 178 teachers. You can't have
Yeah.
all 178 teachers off on the same day, right?
No, no, no.
Still got
Unless it's
children
an
in the building,
inset day. Yeah,
so
but Mhm.
it's navigating that at the same time and finding the right balance, that you are trying to and showing that you are trying to support colleagues to develop personally and professionally at the same time as
Mhm.
I guess business continuity, to get a little bit of a phrase in there.
Yeah.
So I think we can be smart with how we do things, I think, in schools, and not all schools approach it in the same way.
Mhm.
Technology has been a great accelerator for access to information.
Yeah.
Whether you look at social media, you can reach out to an author, you can reach out to a researcher, you
Mhm.
can attend a webinar online, you can catch up with that. And I think, you know, enabling staff to access those different tools and giving them the time to do that is really important. But I do think something should come back into the building as a result of that. You're not just going for the sake of going because it looks like a good event. Um,
Yeah, I completely agree, Ollie. And this is the discussion I was having with colleagues today. They're saying, with the rise in technology, we don't have to go and sit face to face in a session somewhere out of town or wherever. It's there for us online, and a lot of these sessions are held after school hours for those who are interested. So there are no cover implications or anything like that. But what teachers are saying at the moment is, how much of that information is transmitted to the staff body. Instead, we're given CPDs, as I said before, that have no real impact on our day-to-day teaching and learning, or day-to-day leadership. And I think they're just saying it's time for leaders to get out there and see what's happening out there, the things that are making an impact, and then bringing it to staff and encouraging staff to develop further. One colleague actually said, how about creating action research amongst us? And I think my school started something like that, and get teachers to come together who are like minded to work on projects that will make an impact in the school, identifying areas in the school that need to be developed, and get staff to come together and do that. Because the thing is, we often think that all the information has to come from our leaders, but it doesn't, because you've got teachers there with a wealth of information or skill set or knowledge who are just sitting on it, wasting away, and they leave the profession and they don't get to pass that on. So it's about leaders sometimes letting go of the reins a little bit and develop staff and get them to develop each other. And I think that's what learning organizations do, right? You make sure that you know your staff body. And as you said, Ollie, you go out, you get some training, you come back, and you share that with staff. You have a platform to share that. And again, Emily said she agrees with you, Ollie, but time is our greatest enabler, and we just don't seem to have time. But there are means and ways of getting around this. And I think that's how leaders need to start thinking. So my next question is, how is technology influencing the education landscape? Do you think we're taking this seriously as educators, especially in terms of teaching and learning and leadership? How
I
is it
think
changing the way education looks today?
I think there's a few different dynamics to this.
Mm,
I think people are still a little bit burnt out,
mhm,
to be brutally honest, from kind of COVID. But at the same time, I think now leaders and teachers are a little bit more mindful of asking some pretty sensible questions around, why am I using this piece of technology? How does this
yes.
benefit the learners? How does it improve my teaching and their learning? How do I know it's actually, how do I know and how am I measuring the impact that it's actually having?
Mhm,
Because it's all good and well having 15 different subscriptions for 1 year group, but actually what's tangible that you can take away from all of those things that um, that do improve education and the educational experience of the young people
mhm,
and enable you as a teacher. So I think we're still in that point. I think we're starting to now see a trend in more technology being used.
mhm,
After COVID, we had the massive surge in people using technology. Then we regressed a little bit where we kind of went back to, but we've always done it this way. And now it's increasing again. Some
mhm.
interesting research from Whole on IQ identified that $6 trillion was spent on educational technology in 2022. That was almost 5% of the entire global education spend.
Yes.
When you look at numbers like that, it's unfathomable. Um,
Mhm,
they say that by the end of this year, it will be nearly $7 trillion, which is a huge amount of money. But then you look at the spend on training for that quantity of money, it's less than 4%. So it's like we're spending loads of money on all this stuff, but we're not training anybody on it. So kind of
exactly.
going full circle a little bit. It's like it's our job, to create the space so that people have the time
Mhm,
to get trained on those things. But how's it improving leadership? I think it's giving us access to data more
mhm,
readily and more easily than we've ever seen. I think it's enabling us to be a little bit more innovative with some of our approaches. Rewind, I don't know, 10 years ago, say you had a teacher that had to go off sick for whatever reason, or a teacher that had to kind of leave for whatever reason, you know, that learning and those students would be essentially covered by someone internally that wasn't necessarily that specialism. But now you can find an online tutor or a MOOC or something that
mhm.
enables those students to have that specialist attention from someone with that domain of expertise, and their experience continues. So I think things like that are quite helpful,
Yeah.
certainly from a leadership viewpoint, that it helps you solve complex problems by presenting the information that you need to you much faster. From
Yeah.
a teaching and learning perspective, I think we're starting to see more personalisation for each individual. I think the
Mhm,
tools that are out there that are really helpful for students break down walls where perhaps they had been before for students that need particular um, assistive needs or accessibility needs. I think
mhm,
some of those kind of barriers are being broken down by lots of the different tools that are on the market. I think it's got the capacity to reduce teacher workload through the automation of some of those kind of administrative tasks, but
Hmm.
also the kind of baked in ability for teachers to share the content that they've created on that platform, all the platforms having a vast array of content that is adaptable and kind of has machine learning baked into it to automate and generate loads of new questions to keep quizzing and questioning the students. I think that's really helpful. Back when I
Yeah.
started teaching, it was me writing the questions. So
Yeah,
now
tell me about it.
now I don't need to do that. So that helps me quite a lot, and it helps teachers quite a lot. And I think some of the more kind of interactive content that EdTech can afford us, and
Hmm.
just to break down the walls from a classroom, you can transport students into a completely different space thanks to technology, whether that's you take them on a virtual field trip, whether that's you do something a little bit more simple like jump on Google Maps and kind of drop yourself into the middle of a different landscape that is unfamiliar to them, but they're learning about in geography,
Hmm.
all the way through to having an esports program, right, and like battling against another school that's the other side of the world because it's
Yeah.
fun and interesting to do. So I think it affords lots of different opportunities for us. It's just where do you start and which one do you go
That's
with,
it.
and that's the key driving question is why are you doing it, how's
Hmm.
this going to benefit you, and how does it fit your context and the needs of your learners where you're currently at.
Yeah.
Once you drill down into that, um, and ensure that it aligns to your kind of coherence of language of learning in the school, uh, then you're
Yeah.
getting to the point around making kind of sensible decisions.
Yeah. Ollie, thank you so much for that because, you talked about the vast amount of money spent on all this tech and in education, but then staff don't get the training and on how to use the various tools, and so they just become accessories. So I taught in a school a few years ago, and every single child had a Chromebook, and the Chromebook had to be on the desk. And if the Chromebooks were not on the desk for every lesson, every single period, then they would be sanctioned. And quite frankly, a lot of those Chromebooks stayed on the desks untouched because the teachers didn't really know how to use them effectively in the classroom. Instead, they were battling against these students watching football, especially during the World Cup. Oh, it was a nightmare. They pretended that they were accessing whatever learning you've put on or Teams or whatever it is, or Google Drive, and they were doing something else. And I think it's so important that we, as you said, ask the question, why? Why are we doing this? And it's really unfortunate, Oli, but just I said I did a survey recently, a questionnaire, and there are still teachers who are a little bit scared of technology. And I went to a conference as well, and one particular teacher was upset because the presenter was talking about the benefits of AI and deep fake and AR. And this teacher got really annoyed and said, why are we encouraging students to use these things? And I think it is so important as leaders that we prepare staff in whatever way, shape, or form to be able to take control of this technology and use it, for our own benefit, create questions, get the students to be engaged. I'm now teaching my students in English how to use AI to help them to think critically, how to critique AI as well, because otherwise we'll be fighting this battle of students asking AI to write their coursework and to write their essays. And so they were shocked when I said to them, here's an extract, put that in AI, ask for a summary of it, or ask to identify the key themes, and then you critique it and tell me if you agree or what would you change. And I think that's the thing. Again, there's the time isn't there, but it's so important that we make the time so that because that's the way we're going. My lecturer said, and I can just see Emily laughing her head off when I mention my lecturer. She thinks I talk about my lecturer constantly. But he said we're going to come to a point where, well, teachers maybe sometimes always face to face,
Yeah.
but are we equipped to handle that? And he mentioned me sitting in my lounge and I've got robots or whatever doing
Yeah.
tasks and stuff. So, we're getting to that stage, and I don't think we should be afraid of it. And we shouldn't see it as Armageddon and, oh my gosh, aliens are coming to take over. but as educators, Ollie, I'm sure you've experienced this. Students, they just know how to navigate it so efficiently, and we have to try to be a step ahead. Today, a year 10 boy said to me, "Oh, so miss, where in the UK do you live?" And I said, "Oh, somewhere on the coast." And I kid you not, he found the coastal towns. He said, "Is that southeast or southwest?" I said, "Southeast." And he landed straight on Hastings. And he started to zoom in. And he said, "Do you go past this roundabout?" And it's the same. And in our discussions in my course, we're saying, use these tools to create educational things for students to engage them and to keep them occupied and to keep them focused at the same time learning. So I think it's so important. So Ollie, before we go to the news, just share with us your opinion of AI and the use of AI in education. What do you think? Should we be afraid of it?
I don't think we should. All the technology in the world means absolutely nothing without a human touch. I think teachers will never be replaced.
Mhm.
And your example was a perfect example for me of it's not what you do, it's how you do it.
Yes.
That's a great example of digital literacy that you've just positive digital literacy that you've just given there. And I think any learning organization, kind of coming slightly full circle again back to your question earlier, we should be open and willing to hear from the students and learn from them. You know, they're growing up with this stuff, right? It's happening right in front of them. So
Mhm.
there's nothing wrong with us learning from them. I think AI can be a really useful tool. Yes, we need to kind of understand and educate students around bias and all of
Yes.
those other facets around AI, but we also need to teach them to be discerning users of technology, and that's being positive digital citizens and being
Mhm.
digitally literate. And I think that the example that you gave there is a wonderful example of doing that positively and having that open dialogue with the students, going, all right, let's see what you got. Let's see how this can actually help us learn.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Definitely so important. And it's just finding the time and the funding.
well, there's loads of free stuff out there, right? So it's just
True.
pick one thing and have a go with it. um, and road test it, road test as to
Mhm.
how you might use it in the classroom, and then give it a go and be open with the students. Just say, look, I'm going to give this a go. Like you, I've done a survey. How many students in our school are using AI? Loads of them are. So
Mhm.
actually, we just need to get to a point where they can educate us, but we can educate them in equal measure on all of those things. But you have to keep the main thing, and that's learning.
Exactly. And I love what you said earlier. Keep asking why. Why am I doing this? Am I doing it because somebody on one of these social media networks said, "Oh yeah, I tried this and it's great." Is it suitable for my culture or the climate of my school? So
Yeah.
important. Ollie, believe it or not, we're almost at the final stretch. So we're going to pause, listen to the news, and when we come back, we'll continue the discussion. We're going to talk about, well, we've already talked about how leaders could prepare staff and students for the changes and the influences of technology. We've already kind of commented on that, but we'll talk about the extent to which you agree that leaders must continue to engage in personal development. How will that influence staff? And who's responsible for professional development? And then if you could share some of your own experiences as well. So we'll be right back. Those of you online, thank you so much for joining us. Please stay tuned. Do not go anywhere. It is good to see so many of you. We've got somebody called a bond or Bowed. Pardon me if I've mispronounced, but thank you so much. Those of you who are listening from Romania, the UK, perhaps Lebanon, I think. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll go to the news. And when we come back, we'll wrap up the discussion. Thank you so far, Ollie, for the insightful discussions. Thank you so much.
Empowering education with Easy for You, where innovation meets accessibility. Our subscription-based offering not only equips schools with cutting-edge devices, but revolutionizes the learning experience by eliminating financial barriers, streamlining support, and embracing technology. We're not just providing tools, we're shaping a future where every student can thrive, unburdened by limitations. Easy for you, transforming education, one device at a time. Find out more at www.easyforyou.school.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Reading Solutions UK. Are you looking for best practices and innovative strategies to foster confident, lifelong readers? Join the free online International Reading Conference on the 11th, 12th and 13th of June. Hear from speakers like TV personality and education expert Basit Siddiqui, beloved children's author Michael Rosen, fluency expert Tim Rosinski, EEF specialist Chloe Butlin, the National Literacy Trust's Irene Picton, and a range of experienced practitioners, including MAT leaders, deputy heads, heads of English, high-level teaching assistants, and school librarians. Through the three-day conference, speakers will explore a range of topics at the forefront of the current educational landscape, with sessions relevant for all educators and key stages. Visit Reading Solutions at readingsolutionsuk.co.uk for more information and to sign up for this free conference.
Hi teachers, we're Apps for Good, and we give schools like yours free introductory computing courses. Our courses are for everyone, including those who aren't computing teachers, and they're fully equipped with resources mapped to the UK computing curriculum. Independent learning is central to our courses. Your students will develop essential and digital skills by working in teams to create prototype apps for good. We'll even connect you with industry volunteers to give real-world feedback. Let's empower every young person you teach to shape their future with technology. Speak to us at www.appsforgood.org.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
The BBC features an article on teacher retention, with a piece leading with the headline, "Would a 1:40 p.m. Friday finish stop teachers quitting?" The article reports on troubling statistics which reveal that the number of empty teaching posts in England has more than doubled in the past 3 years, according to recent official figures. Whilst politicians have pointed to rising teacher numbers, some have acknowledged that government's figures also show that targets for recruiting teacher trainees have been missed for 9 out of the 10 previous years. This is despite raises to starting salaries. Teacher recruitment has featured in election campaigns, with Labour promising 6,500 more teachers and the Lib Dems also saying they would invest in more. Giving teachers an early finish on a Friday or a day off every other week have been amongst ideas schools themselves are considering. The article features comments from one former teacher who recently left the profession. She said in the report that leaving to protect her physical and mental health after experiencing anxiety had been the best decision she'd ever made, and that this was despite support being offered by her school. She was also overwhelmed by workload. Annual figures released by the Department for Education at the start of June cover the academic year 2023 to 24. They show that on top of rising vacancy rates, the proportion of state school teachers leaving the sector is at its highest since 2010, with 39,971 teachers leaving. This represents 8.8% of the workforce and does not include those who have retired or died. A report in May by the Education Select Committee said recruitment and retention was a persistent challenge. Early Friday finishes have been trialled by a school in London. Lessons begin at 9 a.m. and finish at 4 p.m. Monday to Thursday, so no learning time is lost. The head teacher said the response from staff and students was positive, and it had helped the school support well-being for all. Full details of the report can be found on the BBC News website. In Northern Ireland, the Belfast Telegraph reports on higher education. It says that students in Northern Ireland who are about to leave for higher education feel they have been left at a disadvantage when applying for university places in the Republic of Ireland. The Secondary Students' Union of Northern Ireland has raised concerns about what it calls double standards north of the border. This year, students in Northern Ireland are sitting A-levels with a full return to normality and no mitigations for COVID-19 in grade awarding. In contrast, the Leaving Certificate marking has not returned to normal since the pandemic. The union has called this unjust and said it disadvantages those in Northern Ireland competing for the same university places. SSUNI President Ellen Taylor said that structural barriers to Northern Irish students will deepen inequality, and that the Irish government and Northern Irish ministers needed to work together to ensure young people's futures. The Guardian reports on a survey of children in the UK and Ireland, which reveals that they are reading fewer books than they did last year. The 2024 What Kids Are Reading report surveyed more than 1.2 million pupils and showed a 4.4% decrease in the number of books read by pupils. According to the study, the decline in reading is particularly acute in secondary schools and affects the difficulty of books being read as well as the volume. The survey showed pupils read progressively more challenging books until year 6, but after that the difficulty level tended to plateau until year 9 before a sharp drop in difficulty of books read by older secondary pupils. The research began in 2008, and this year is the first year there has been a decline in the numbers of books read, apart from during the first year of the pandemic. Explanations for the decline have included the drop in school attendance, with the number of pupils persistently absent increasing. Finally, the Washington Post features a story on Max the cat, who has been given an honorary doctorate from the Vermont State University. The 5-year-old tabby roams campus, socialises with students, and even attends lectures. He also has his own staff email address. Having attended the campus for 4 years, he has been awarded the doctorate in honour of his work. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Jo Fox.
Thank you so much, Joe. Very insightful news there. And Ollie, it's almost as if Joe got wind of what we're going to be talking about, because she hit the nail on the head there about recruitment. And that's one of the challenges you mentioned earlier.
It was also slightly obscure to hear about the schools finishing early on a Friday. The impact that had on well-being, when you and I are both sat in the UAE and we have a 4.5-day week and we finish at 12 o'clock every Friday. Many moons ago, teacher training, a school I worked in, finished at 1 o'clock on a Friday, and it was amazing. Everybody in that school loved it.
I love it, and that's something I've embraced thoroughly. And the thing is, we finish at midday, I come home and I have a nice healthy nap. And I think most of us do actually. On a Friday we come home and we just have a nap first before anything else. I really appreciate that. So yeah, it's really unfortunate to hear of the mass exodus, and I mean, this has been happening for a while. And she mentioned mental health issues as well, which is impacting teachers increasingly because of the workload and lack of staffing, I guess. So lots to think about there as leaders, because you yourself, if you were a leader in the UK, for instance, then you'd have to be thinking, what do I do to retain staff? What bold moves am I going to make? And I'm not so sure lots of schools are prepared to give up that extra 2-3 hours on a Friday, for example, because we're all thinking about curriculum and outcomes, aren't we? And results, and we forget people's mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a huge challenge, isn't it, that we face? And I think there are other things that need to happen as well. Like, school starts really early, right? We still exist in this kind of world where education the timings of it are placed to support adults getting to their job, or and children are not awake, when school starts. So let's start
Mhm.
school a little bit later. I think that would probably help quite a lot of people.
Yeah, and shorten some of the periods as well.
Yeah,
When you have a double, oh boy, especially with a year seven or key stage three class, and you have a double lesson without a break in between, it does get challenging. So I think these are just some of the things. It gets challenging for us as the teachers as well. I'm going to be honest. Only you yourself, you start to itch for a cup of tea or something sweet
absolutely. Yeah,
halfway through a double.
coffee and
So
chocolate.
I know we've got a few minutes left, and just wanted to round up back to the topic that we've been discussing, and just to ask you, to what extent do you agree that leaders must continue to engage in professional development, and how will this influence staff? We mentioned it a little bit, but does it usually influence staff or?
I think it can do.
Mhm,
You know, and not just from a professional learning viewpoint. If as a leader you're trying to build alignment and kind of collective efficacy and just that collegiality and collaboration across your school, staff need to see that you engage in the things that they engage in. So
yes.
whether that's covering lessons, they need to see that you do cover some lessons at certain points in time, but they also need to see that you are involved and invested in your own personal professional development at the same time. Certainly we go back to kind of our earlier conversation in the show where we were talking about organizations being a learning organization versus just being an organization. Well, everybody has to be on board with that and learning and evidencing that they are learning and just trying to be better.
Hmm.
Uh, and you have to practice what you preach in that sense. So I guess the challenge for leaders quite often is that you might be the ones that are leading those sessions. So how do staff see that you are learning and not
Hmm.
just being the kind of the deliverer or the sage on the stage, or whatever phraseology you want to give it. And um, you know lots of us in our school are carrying out other forms of professional learning. Like you, I'm doing a doctorate.
Yeah.
Lewis, hey, shout out to Lewis, who's my fellow deputy. I see he's joined the show.
Hi,
Um,
Lois.
he's
Thanks
just
for joining.
he's just finished his MPQH.
Oh, fantastic.
Um, Morgan, who's another host, another member of SLT at our school, she's just finished. Congratulations to her as well. Her
Yay.
Penta Level 2 training, inspectors training. So, there's lots of different ways and shapes that
Hmm.
leaders can um, develop as well. But how do you kind of share that with staff? Well, I think it's just whether that's in briefing or an email, however you communicate those things. Just well done to Lewis, who's just completed his MPQH. Well done
Exactly.
to Michelle, who's just finished her doctorate. Well done to so
Mhm,
and so, who's put this into practice off the back of our coaching conversation
mhm.
CPD 2 weeks ago. I think it's just acknowledging what people do and sharing what they are doing, because I think when it's actively known that you are invested in professional development as well, that does
Mhm.
influence colleagues,
I
undoubtedly.
agree. And that takes me to the next question then. So, who's responsible for staff professional development and why? And I asked my colleagues today, and I'd love to hear your response to this, Ollie, before I share what they said. So, who's responsible?
I've been saying this for probably about 10 years ago now, and everybody, there is nobody in the building that is not.
Hmm.
You don't need the title of assistant head or deputy head. Well, that person might be the person that kind of leads and coordinates aspects of it. We
Hmm.
are all leaders of learning, and that starts first and foremost in the classroom, and then that translates to our own practice and the practice of our colleagues at kind of a local level. So in our department, at a national level, and faculties, if you want to call it that, in a school, and then kind of organisationally, internationally within your kind of school setting. So I think we all are, just like it's not the English department's sole responsibility to teach literacy, it's every teacher's responsibility to teach numeracy and digital literacy. We're all responsible for our own personal development.
Yeah. So my colleagues were saying, they said that we're all responsible, but they also felt like the leaders have a responsibility as well to ensure that they do get the opportunities to, engage in these CPDs or professional development, whether internally or externally. They just felt like they needed the support as well from leaders, but they, as I said earlier, they often feel as though they have to fight to get this done or fight to be on a course. But it goes back down to the logistics as well, for staff being off and all of that. So it all goes back to timing. But yeah, so they agree that they should take some ownership. They actually said today, Michelle, you don't wait for people to provide CPDs. You go out and source it yourself, and you do that in your own time after school on a weekend. But that's because that's my passion. I love to learn. I love to know what's going on. And you made another comment there, Ollie, which I think is a gem. We're all leaders of learning, every single one of us as educators. And then this trickles down to our students as well. And they see that passion and they see that drive as well. And then they aspire to be the same later on in life or even during their studies. So I think it is so important that we continue to improve ourselves through knowledge, through practice, and how we apply all of this as well. So, Ollie, final thoughts on the importance of leaders to develop a culture of learning among staff, or just anything you wish to say, a takeaway on leadership as a senior leader based on your experience? Tell me one thing that you would like to leave people with.
Every opportunity is a opportunity for professional learning.
Mhm.
I think that's whether that's a corridor conversation, whether that's a more formal conversation, whether that's a meeting, whether that's a professional learning opportunity where you're with other colleagues. I just think that every opportunity and interaction is probably a better word. Every interaction is an opportunity for learning in schools.
Yes.
And I think if we can be mindful and cognizant of that and have that kind of mindset,
Mhm.
I think that we can develop ourselves and our practice at an ever faster rate.
Totally agree. And we're nearing the end of the show. And I just wanted to sum up some things that we discussed tonight and some of the gems that Ollie left with us. And because remember, this platform is also a form of CPD. And he mentioned that as leaders, it's important that we lead with integrity, that we lead with empathy, that we're inquisitive and collaborative, and that we ensure that we're aware of the people around us, aware of our own needs as well, and be aware of our own strengths or own areas for development, and then we develop those accordingly. That we're adaptive, that those moments when you have to just change the plans and accept that this plan will not work, we need to change it. And most of all, be leaders of learning, constantly learning and applying this to our practice and empowering those around us as well to do the same. Because after all, our role, our primary role as educators, is to influence our students and to make sure that they themselves become optimally rounded citizens. And in order to do that, we have to make sure we exemplify the very said qualities. So, Ollie, thank you so much for joining us tonight on Teachers Talk Radio. That was an invaluable and insightful discussion. Thank you so much. I knew you would have delivered. And just say thanks to the listeners and thanks for your contributions. Those of you who sent me a message, please continue to tune in and let's continue to talk about everything that's affecting us as educators, as leaders, as classroom practitioners, and the way forward. So join me again in 2 weeks' time for another engaging discussion. Ollie, thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you at the next conference, whichever one that may be. But also to have a catch up even before that, because I need to pick your brain as well about something else. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks,
And
Michelle.
listeners, have a great evening, and I'll see you in 2 weeks' time.
Thanks, Michelle. Bye.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time. on Teachers Talk Radio.
Right. So good night, everyone, or good evening, wherever you are. Thank you so much for joining.